Hi, I'm Brian Cardell. I'm a developer advocate at Igalia,
And I'm Eric Meyer, also a developer advocate at Igalia.
and welcome to 2025.
Yeah, right.
It's funny; it doesn't feel like 2025.
No, but really everything past about 2006 doesn't feel like.
True, true. Um, Also, could have something to do with the fact that it's still 2024 when we're recording this, but
Well,
maybe in a couple of days when we release this, it will feel really, truly like 2025. But you're right; I doubt it.
yeah. I don't. Maybe everything past 2019 because that's the year that Blade Runner was supposed to be set.
Hmm.
And
Everything after
every
that,
every year after that, you're like, this doesn't feel like the weird future.
yeah, it's not the
It
weird
feels like
future,
a terrible present,
right?
or maybe not terrible for some of us, hopefully. But
Yeah, no flying cars yet, but
sorry, I'm actually really glad we don't have flying cars because I've seen what people do with regular ground cars, and I
hmm.
don't want them flying. But anyway, you were about to say.
Yeah. So we asked people to think about, just based on a random conversation that Eric and I had. Hey, we think about the past and the past year. We do a lot of talking, reflecting, but looking forward. What kind of things are we looking forward to in the web platform? What kind of things would we like to have happen? So we asked people on the socials to write in with their wishes for 2025.
Yep.
And we got some, and we're going to talk about those and maybe what ours are as well.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're going to be able to touch on every single individual person, but a few people said, probably because they were answering us, a few people raised something that we often talk about, which is basically a better funding model for the web platform.
Yeah, several people. Yeah.
Yeah, Eric Portis said that.
I don't know how to pronounce some of these handles, and I don't know their names,
Truth.
but we got uh, one that was I wish for a well-funded gecko and all Firefox related stuff and
Mm.
well-steered Mozilla organizations. That's kind of adjacent. We
That
got
was that was from my Fonge.
yeah, we got experimentation with funding of web feature development,
Mm.
which is, I think, reflective of our open prioritization.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
and
From
probably also, just all the different ways that we're doing that, like we're doing it a lot of ways now. Uh, they're starting the Chromium Foundation. Um, Igalia, does contracting. We're beginning to get some small grants from different places. So
mm-hmm. Yeah, there are experiments with funding models. Us talking to grant organizations, and like you say, in some cases, getting grants. Um, the Chromium Foundation, if that does move forward in the way that that Google has talked about it, could be very interesting as a source of at least semi-sustainable funding. But it's going to take a lot, and yeah, I think that's something you and I certainly wish for, as we do every year. Um,
yeah.
it's possible that with the various legal actions that are happening, not just for Google but also for Apple, and
Hmm.
who knows who else might get action taken against them, um, that maybe that will start to create sort of ecosystem incentives to create what we would consider more sustainable funding models. But yeah, you know, then again, maybe not. But it is something that I know that you and I both want, and that a lot of people want. I mean, and a lot of people maybe wouldn't talk about it that way, but if just 5 minutes of conversation and you realize, yeah, we're on the same page here. We were just using different words to describe it. So,
Yeah. I think looking through the responses, there seem to be kind of like a few themes. So
mm,
one is about funding, like you said. Another one is about networks.
mm.
Eric Portis actually listed three things. So one of them was unfunded networks. Um,
In the sense of Aaron Kassane's talk at XOXO this past year.
yeah, I assume that's what it is. I
Yeah.
haven't watched it, but I did some googling, and
Mm-hmm.
I know she talks about networks and things a lot in terms of also like moderation and things like that.
Yeah, governance questions.
Yeah. Um,
Has actually done a fair bit of research with along with Darius Kazemi.
mhm.
Um, they like did a huge survey, not survey in the sense of like check A, B, C, D options, but actually talking to people who run Mastodon instances, for example, and say, how do you moderate? How do you govern? What are your policies? And
Mm.
put out a fairly lengthy report with a lot of details. That my understanding is that it was meant to be descriptive, not prescriptive.
Right.
As we often say, it was like, here's how it's being done, but with the goal of allowing people who have to manage networks or some part of networks to look at that and say, okay, what does that mean? What does that mean for what I'm doing? What does it mean for the ecosystem? What are some best practices we could get out of here? Just really a way to have a conversation that is well informed instead of just shooting the breeze and hypothesizing. So,
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think those things, every time you share ideas, they cross pollinate one another. They, maybe you think you have a good idea, and then you read where somebody else said, "Oh, we did consider doing X," but then somebody pointed out how it's really kind of messed up, and then you read it and you go, "Oh, yeah, maybe we shouldn't do that." I
mm-hmm.
think a lot of ideas in how we should do things are born of good intentions, and
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes in the conversations you find critiques of things that you thought were good ideas, or you find new good ideas, or yeah, I think it's a really positive thing. So I'm
Yeah.
actually really glad that he submitted that one, because I personally would really like to see that talk, and now it's in my queue to watch it later.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And someone who, one of the replies we got was from Xavier Gongora, I think. That's toplap.org, who said that it would be interesting to see cooperative efforts on frameworks for a quote, their quote, social web, unquote, um, which is, maybe not exactly the same, but it's related, right? The sort of
Totally. Yeah.
idea for, they said things like exploring affordances for both devs and users of well thought out values and guiding principles. That, design is a big component of how networks function, right? If a network is designed for engagement, then it will essentially elevate certain forms of behavior. And if a network is prioritized against engagement, for example, if it's designed to encourage sort of more reflection, then that other sorts of behavior will emerge, and that gets at the sorts of things that Erin talks about, that she and Darius researched, and that other people certainly have talked about. That you have to have a clear vision for what you want a network to be, and that guides things like the design of prompts. The difference in prompts between what's going on right now and hey, what do you think about life? Like those are very just that difference in prompt, even if everything else about the UI is basically the same, encourages different behaviors. So, and you can certainly go a lot further than that, but yeah, it would be interesting to see people take the lessons of the last 15, almost 20 years of social media now, and start to really say, like explicitly, what do we want in social networks?
Yeah.
To be fair, like very complex, difficult questions, ones that I am in no way qualified to even start to answer. But I think they're both interesting and critical conversations to have if we want to sort of keep iterating on social networking.
One of the things that's mentioned in that post is Sprightly, and you
Mm,
can find out some stuff on sprightly.institute on the web.
okay. Yeah.
And it's interesting thing there. They're doing a funding drive right now. You can go and donate some money to them, help them reach their goal. But some of the people involved in this are actually co-authors of ActivityPub. So there's Christine Lemmerweber
Uh
and
huh.
Jessica Talon, who actually used to be at Igalia. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and also, we do some contracting with them. Andy Wingo does some work
Right.
for that. It's pretty interesting stuff. And check them out and their mission around next generation social networking.
Mm. On that note, actually, I'll throw in a reading recommendation for those who like to do that sort of thing. The author Ruth Anna Emrys had a book that came out. It was either early this year or sometime last year, or maybe even in 2022, because the what is time. But anyway, the book is called A Half-Built Garden, and it's an alien first contact novel where aliens come to Earth. But it's what interests me in relation to this is not necessarily the alien first contact bit. It's the description of how social networks function in this world that Ruth Ann Amherst uh, has created, which were very interesting. They're called dandelion networks. I'm not going to get into the details,
It's very interesting.
but yeah, it's the dandelion networks both do and don't remind me of Mastodon, and that the design that you start to understand throughout the book is that like you have little sort of local nodes that federate with each other in effect. I don't want to go any further than that because I might forget some of them or misrepresent some of the details. And also, it's a book worth reading, I think, even if you're not usually into aliens landing on Earth novels. And it's not a war novel, by the way. It's not an alien invasion novel. It is an aliens coming to visit novel.
Friendly. They're friendly. They just stop over, knock on the door, say, "Hey,
Uh,
neighbor."
Not even. Again, it's whether or not they're friendly maybe depends on your viewpoint,
Stop by
which
with a
is
nice alien pie.
actually getting together for communal meals is kind of a theme that runs through the book.
That's
So
great.
anyway, again, A Half-Built Garden by Ruth Anna Emrys. There you go. A little
You know,
reading.
it's funny. A little bit earlier, I said I think looking through these, there are three themes, and I
Mm-hmm.
noticed that the first one we had in our pad was by Eric Portis, and then
Mm-hmm.
the second one I said, and Eric also mentioned this one, and funny enough, he also mentioned accessibility, which I think is like the third
Yeah,
theme. Uh,
that's Eric for you. Got his finger right on the pulse of
yeah.
what's going on. But yeah, accessibility.
So he said, I hope that EU accessibility law does good things for users' experience. So not like GDPR.
Mm.
Then our friend of the show, Adrian Roselli,
Mm-hmm.
said that articles that assert a thing is accessible because they actually confirmed it with disabled users and or AT.
Yeah,
If
assistive
nothing else,
technology there.
fewer articles and posts promulgating bad information,
Yeah, which fair. Um, and that is a
which shocked me. I had no like that came out of left field. I don't associate that kind of thing with Adrian at all.
uh-huh, sure. Um,
Now he said, "Are either of you seriously surprised that I would say this?" And we had a little fun with that.
and yeah, I mean that's been Adrian's wish for years and years. Sort of like we have a wish
Not only.
for funding models.
Mhm.
And absolutely agree. There was a somewhat similar thing from Eric Eggert saying, "I just want people to learn the simple basics of the web." If he said, if I could never see a clickable but not keyboard accessible div or a button inside a link inside of a button ever again, I would be so
Mhm.
happy. And gotta agree, that would be really nice if people would just go back to basics a lot more than they do. Although I will say there was that sort of cross pollinated in my mind with something that Ollie W said, which was all HTML form controls look decent by default and can be styled with CSS, which is actually not on my wish list, but I have kind of a heretical view on this.
So it's tricky what this means exactly.
Mm,
So I think we've gone back and forth and repeated a lot of the same thing so many times on the show, but um, if you poll people, and we have actually polled people on this,
mm, mm,
like, what do you want the browser to do? How do you want controls to look? Um, Even with saying, should they look the same across all, like in Chrome, they always look the same, or they always look the same on Apple devices. On iOS, they always look like iOS controls, like native ones.
Right.
Even if you ask just that kind of question, you will get literally almost exactly 50-50 answer.
Hmm.
People don't agree on this. And so they also won't agree on what is sort of aesthetically pleasing, right? So um,
Yeah.
we'll get something that's kind of good in all of them, probably, good enough.
Hmm.
Um, that tries, and that won't look the same. But there is currently an effort that began in OpenUI and has gone through CSS Working Group and collaborated with the what working group, like Appearance Base, it's called, where we will allow you to use the appearance property to set a value called base, which will like start everything on a pretty almost exactly normalized, like this is what it's going to look like, and that way
Hmm.
you can style it as you see fit.
Hmm.
But chances are that one will look pretty bland. It's not going to be very opinionated, it's just going to be
Right.
functional.
Right.
And so it's a difficult thing to balance, because like you would like it to be out of the box, just you don't have to do anything to it. That would be super.
Right.
But also you want to be able to customize it, and like these things are difficult to balance. So I think that the
Yep.
appearance base will be really useful, and that we'll probably get, I think, what I hope, maybe not for 2025, that might be too soon, but what I hope we get out of this is kind of a nice, what's the right analogy? Like themes, just themes that people make, beautiful themes that people make that we can share. Um,
Yeah, so this is where I'm going to be a heretic. I personally still think that form control should not be stylable. Form control should look like the native operating system because that's what people are used to. I am not a fan of even coloring scroll bars. It doesn't fit with your theme. Sorry, but what's important here is that users recognize a scroll bar for what it is, or an input. And I feel like I kind of have a Wonder Twin Power fists with Lucas Trum had this wish kind of for page loading indicators. So he said for single page applications, he wants native page loading indicators. Everyone reinventing loading indicators or the lack thereof is bad. And I'm like, yeah, I would be all completely on board with that. If people can, if users could know, oh, that thing means that a page is loading, and not, wait, why are there little dancing helixes on this page? Where's my content? I mean, yes, most people usually figure it out, but yeah, it just people keep reinventing this stuff and it leads to user confusion. And I feel the same way about inputs and scroll bars and that sort of thing. And I know that every designer listening to this is preparing to write a nasty letter to the editor or whatever. And they're throwing tomatoes at the speaker. But yeah, sorry, that's just thinking for years about how would we let people style this stuff. Eventually I came to the point of view of maybe we just shouldn't.
just going back to the thing that you said, like, it plays into what I was saying too, where,
Mm.
you're not out on an island by yourself. I think that there's, 49% roughly of people would kind of roughly agree with you
Right.
on, I think they should look like the operating system, like,
Mm.
and the reason is always what you said, because like that's what people recognize. And this is again like it's a difficult thing to balance, because
Yeah.
like a select doesn't look the same on Android and on iOS and on Windows. Like they don't look the same.
No.
So which should it look like? Should it look the same for all web browsers across operating systems, or should it look the same for the operating system? And um,
I
but I think
yeah.
like even people like me have nuance. I also just I don't like styled scroll bars for the most part. I think they put me off.
Mm.
I don't know. It generally doesn't hurt me. I just aesthetically disapprove of them.
Yes, you kids.
Let's see, what else did people write in? Navigation API stable
Yeah,
and cross browser.
right. This is actually on my personal wish list, even though I almost never do anything with navigation scripting. I mean, very occasionally I do, but almost never. But I understand this is sort of like just one of those things where we have really terrible half measures that kind of get at some of the things you might want to do with a navigation API. Having an actual stable cross-browser navigational API, I think, would be a big win, and I would really like to see it.
Yeah, the part of the reason that I put this one right after the last one is because like I feel like conceptually they are a little bit maybe related.
Mm-hmm.
I remember like the way back, like late '90s, we had frame sets, right?
Frame for
And
the
with frame
gamers.
sets, you would divide the page up into multiple pieces, and like clicking in one of them would cause a different one of them to change, or could cause itself to change. I mean, it's up in the air. But generally, when I think about single page applications, I think about like you load a template, and that template includes some slots in it that the contents of that may change over time. But it's generally not like all areas of the UI change all the time, right? Um,
Yeah.
like if you have your email client, you have your different labels or folders or whatever the analogy that your thing uses, and you click on them and it shows you mails that are in that, and maybe if you have a split view that's a preview, you click on those and it changes what's in the one to the right or to the bottom, whatever. And I have always thought that we seem to build things in a similar way, and that we ought to have something more like an iframe, where part of that, like a built-in part of that, would be that it had a native loading indicator, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a thing that we had in a way with frame sets. So maybe with like view transitions and the navigation API and this new thinking into things, maybe there's room for us to eventually consider something where there would be like a nice way to say, to semantically indicate to the browser that this is a part of the page that I intend to update, or maybe even here's a network request that's attached to the update, and you go ahead and display a loading indicator there while it's in process. So anyway, I think they're a little bit related, and that is
Mm-hmm.
uh, a wish that I have for 2025, and I had for 2024 and 2023, and
Right.
all the way back to at least the early 2000s.
Right.
I built some frameworks myself that used a like basically they were custom elements before we had custom elements, and that was for me, I was like, of course, that's one of the things, right? You're gonna have that. You're gonna have this element that's just like an asynchronous block that you can load content into, and it just automatically make sure that that it's loading some content.
Yeah.
Okay, what else? What else did people write in about?
I mean, speaking of loading, Summer wanted WASMs loadable for images, videos, and so on, not requiring JavaScript shims. I mean, I guess if you're WASMing, that would be useful. Um,
Hmm.
maybe a default loader spinner would be good
Hmm.
um, in those situations. I mean, so I think at this point we've sort of moved into the more the sort of the granular
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, desires. Like we hit the three themes, but then we have people saying things like, I really want scroll driven animations and anchor positioning to be cross browser and stable. And yeah, absolutely. Some other people I think mentioned view transitions, scroll transitions, those sorts of things. Stuart Langridge, I think, was one who mentioned that. And yeah, those are pretty cool new things that are coming up. They're not cross browser yet. Well, and in the case of anchor positioning, there's been a fair amount of spec revision, so it's actually appropriate that that's not cross browser yet. But I get that people's wish list would be and that's all fixed. And then it goes cross browser because everything's been worked out. And similar for a lot of other things. I absolutely personally want anchor positioning. I can do side notes finally cross browser once that becomes cross browser
Mm-hmm.
without having to do wacky hacks. Would absolutely, there would be so many things you could do with anchor positioning. And, actually, view transitions, whether same page or multi page view transitions combined with anchor positioning could be really amazing. Um, and so, yeah, it was a Brecht de Ruyt, sorry if I got your name wrong, utilitybend.com, who was asking for one of the people asking for scroll driven animations and anchor positioning cross browser. They also wanted a free, fun web for everyone, which, yeah, we would all love that. And actually, one of the ones that Stuart Language mentioned that I really like is font size fit container. So the basic idea being you set the font size so that basically you set font size fit container or whatever name, but fit container is fine for a div. And so each line of text, the font size is changed so that it exactly fills out its line box without needing to like mess with word spacing and letter spacing. So you see this sometimes in poster design where you'll have one line of text that has a few words in it, and that will be a much smaller text, and then there's like one word that is on its own line, and it is a much larger font size, and
Mm-hmm.
that is on purpose. So if I understood what Stuart is asking for, that's you would have a similar thing there. You could use it on like page titles, or I guess you could use it on paragraphs, although maybe there would be a limit to how many lines you could apply it to. Like text wrap balance has a limit to how many lines of text it can be applied to before it gets tossed out the window. It's not a spec limit; it's a performance limit that browsers impose. Um, it's something like if your block of text goes longer than something like 6 lines in Chromium and 10 lines in Firefox, then text wrap balance will become essentially text wrap. It won't balance anymore. In my testing, WebKit actually may not have a limit. It certainly goes much higher than 6 or 10 lines. But again, those are browser performance limitations. It's basically the engineer saying, going any further than this, we start to see hits to performance, and we don't want to go further. So that might happen with font size fit container.
Um, to rewind us way back
Sure.
to the WASM loadables
Oh,
for
uh-huh.
images, the idea there is like if you had like an image, let's say JPEG XL, for example, right? And it was supported in one browser. The idea here was you could polyfill that and you could specify a codec, and the codec could be a WASM file. Um, and so maybe like if you natively supported it or something, or it wouldn't work, or I don't know, like this is not specified, but like
Mm.
the idea is that you could have a codec that was implemented in WASM.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting. I think that it's related to web codecs.
Mm.
Not exactly this, but bits of this. And
Okay.
I agree that I would like to see something that is, gives you that we figure out a capability for extending the web in terms of, codecs and things like that, where there's a path forward where maybe even browser manufacturers can't agree, or that you might have to deliver to an older client or something like that. Where you don't necessarily want like I want a pattern, not a like just we'll go it alone and figure it out as WASM. I don't think that's probably a good idea. Maybe it should be possible, but it's not what I'm going for. What I'm going for is sort of how do we get past the really hard bits of this that are, can I ship this safely or not? Like, let's make it easy for me to ship a thing safely when it's like
Mm.
just a few outliers here and there, and I want to support those people, but also I want to use this new format because it has other advantages. So anyway, I do think that's interesting.
Yeah.
That could especially be interesting maybe in specialized applications. Like if you have an application that does image processing and things like that's probably really really helpful.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
so somebody named Mike Herschel wrote in and said CSS custom media, please. Lots of exclamation point. I agree. This has been on my list for a really long time. I think Tab and I started talking about this in 2010, maybe. I know other people have talked about it, and there are like 2 or 3 different proposals about what this could mean. But I really also would like custom media queries for much the same reason that I would like I would like us to be able to explore that as developers and figure out maybe what are good custom media queries. And
And a custom media query is what's that?
yeah, so that's what I'm saying. There are a few different proposals and ideas about what that could be. Is a thing that would have been part of Houdini
Mm.
because it's the whole effort with Houdini was to explain not explain to you, but explain in a way that you can plug into the magic that is already CSS, right? Like
Okay.
CSS already has lots of magic for like how do you apply a whole bunch of rules in a rule set with this media query, and then it has like a JavaScript API for that, and like we have lots of needs where it's like very close to that, and it would be really great to say, hey, this thing is true now, so go ahead and apply all these rules. And we do it with other ways, but
Mm.
it seems that you want to match the the same pattern basically that you would natively in CSS.
Cool.
Anyway, I
Yeah.
like the idea. I would like to see that one too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we'll get it in 2025, but
um, yeah. And we also had a couple of, I guess, engine requests.
hmm.
One was Ben Delar wanted Safari to fully release WebGPU for all iOS devices. And the Harbinger of Eternal September wanted Servo to be powering Tauri.
That one's interesting because I think Servo is part of Tari now. We have like when you look at the Servo downloads, and really a lot of them are from Tari. So
Mm-hmm.
I've not used Tari. I've listened to some things about it. It seems
Mm-hmm.
like if I were to talk about it, I would sound very naive. I think it's like basically like Electron,
Mm.
but you can use Servo as the rendering engine.
Right.
Um,
We're in favor.
yeah, I like it. I would love to. I would love to find a niche for Servo, really, that
Mm. Mm-hmm.
people think about and get excited about, and keep that going. Going into our you know typical spiel almost at this point about funding.
Yeah.
I think we have a couple of projects that I think are important projects that we have helped champion and try to get people excited about and interested about, and convince them that these things are worth finding ways to fund together. And I would like to see us achieve some more of that. Like with Wolvik, I would like to save the wolves. I would like to keep that alive and healthy by finding some real support for sustaining that. And also for Servo, I think Servo is a really cool project that honestly, I think because it's already memory safe and parallel,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
it's really worth people investing in, like a lot, because otherwise we have to continue to do things and migrate these existing engines in that direction. And um, I don't know. I mean, I think something that's written that way and considered that way from the start is a really valuable thing. Um, so I would really like to see that.
Yeah. What else would you like to see? What's on your list that wasn't on our respondents' list?
Yeah, I don't know actually. This is, I think, what started the conversation in the first place. I was thinking, like, I've been so thinking hard about what we accomplished in 2024 and what things are, the sort of obvious ones that are on the horizon already. Like anchor positioning. I really want anchor positioning.
Yeah.
And, basically the things that are submitted to Interop 2025, a lot of those are things that I want. I guess I can say that I really want, um, to find a way to prioritize MathML and SVG, um,
Yeah.
normalizing them completely into the platform, and making them really good quality where everything in CSS works the way it should, uh, where we take those old code paths that were written like completely separately and align them so that when we make an improvement over here, it benefits all three of them where possible.
Yeah.
So there are lots of things around how you do like hardware acceleration and things like that, that like lots of focus into the HTML CSS stuff and not so much into like SVG, for example. I don't know why you would need to hardware accelerate something in math, but who knows? Maybe,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Maybe. But it shouldn't have to be require a special investment, really. Or at least a completely separated investment. Maybe you need to do a little something special for them. But I guess I would like to see things change so that we really are working on one platform that is HTML,
Mm.
SVG, MathML, because they're all integrated. You can include one in the other for all of them. They all work in the browser to a large extent, but they are both SVG and MathML are, scattered in lots of ways. They both need love that they're not getting from browser vendors, despite.
Yeah.
Uh, I guess, I mean, you've been there, so you can attest
Yep.
basically almost literal begging.
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah.
Yep. Anything else?
I mean, there's the ones that I know that are basically all the ones in Interop
Mm.
that we talk about, that some of them I'm excited about. Anchor positioning, very excited about. View transitions is very cool.
Yep.
Um, there's some stuff like that that's the known stuff, but what are the one or two things that I'm thinking like we didn't get this, we haven't talked about it really, or it's not made progress for a really long time. I'm like, maybe we're almost done with them. Like that would be great, but I doubt it. I just think that it's like we've been spent so long focused on has and container queries
Mm.
being the thing every year. Like every year
Mm-hmm.
they're the thing. Or for a bunch of people for a long time, it was like classes in JavaScript. Like there's some big things that are like the, I don't know, what's the whale we're gonna chase, and yeah,
Right.
and I asked like what are they, and that led to this conversation. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there a big one that is like not one that we've already talked about that you think that you're like, oh boy, if we could just get this.
I'm going to go outside CSS and say the temporal API
Oh yeah,
in
that could be good.
JavaScript.
Yeah,
I would, again, I almost never do time-based JavaScript programming, but a lot of people have to. And having an actually really good time and date calculating API, which is what temporal is, would be fantastic. It would be, I think, a big step forward. And so that's one for me.
totally, totally.
In the CSS world, a lot of it is, I think, things we've already talked about have been not, I wish this whole new thing were done. It's more, um, can we get these things that are being worked on over the finish line? So, like
Mm.
masonry layout, and the work is being done, and there's been the whole debate really between Google and Apple about how it should be specified. My wish list, one of my wishes for this year would be that those decisions would be made and masonry layout would get basically across the finish line. I did a CSS wish list a couple years ago now, and I went back and looked at it, and a lot of things are on that list are either done or almost done. So like subgrid, basically done. Has basically done. Anchor positioning and masonry layout are in.
Close. They're close.
They're close. They're getting there. Element transitions, which is view transitions, basically. The ones that I would like to see that the ones that aren't necessarily being worked on, hanging punctuation cross browser, just the hanging punctuation property in CSS, which Safari WebKit has supported now for coming up close to a decade. They've done it. It's been supported there since 2016, and it's a small thing, and it seems like it's one of those like little things where you think like one person could get this done in a week, but they have other priorities, right? So they can't do that. My white whale, as it were,
Mm-hmm.
that I've been banging on for many years is I really want CSS exclusions. Uh,
Yeah.
Exclusions are, for those not familiar, when you float something, like you float an image or a table or a div or whatever, and the other text goes around that area that it defines. That area that float is defining is an exclusion for the rest of the content. And I just want you to be able to like define for any element. This creates exclusions for other content, which would let you very easily do something like in CSS grid, put an image that's basically centered on a grid gap and pokes into like the two columns next to it, and the content in those columns would flow around each side of the image as if it were like sliced in half and floated, which is a way that you can fake this. But I want to be able to say this element goes here, and it creates an exclusion so other content will avoid it. It doesn't prevent you from overlapping. Like if you specifically like absolutely position two things over each other, that will not necessarily create an exclusion. But you can do a lot with that. And there were proposals, and I think it was Microsoft in Trident did at least some trial implementations of this, but they don't use that engine anymore, so that all went out the window. This is something that I've wanted for a long time, because there are a lot of things that you can fake your way into with a lot of hacking that would become very simple. Sort of the way that Grid made a lot of layout hacks very trivial to do and requiring no hacks. Exclusions would do very similar things, and it would allow for much less sort of rigidly linear design, because even with Grid, yes, you can make things that are less linear than we're used to, but you're still kind of in linear tracks, and faking your way out of that is difficult sometimes. That's
Yeah, this was actually, it was, like you say, it was proposed by Microsoft, and it worked all the way back in IE 10. So I guess that
Yep.
would be Edge HTML, the new engine that they were
Yeah,
writing.
right.
And it was implemented, I think, kind of along with Grid. You can see
Yep.
some old blog posts about it, and the original editor of the spec was Rawson from Microsoft. Uh, and yeah, I mean, it's an interesting idea that we lost along the way.
Yeah.
Um, I did think of something that will kind of bookend us nicely back to the funding model, which is
Okay.
like some kind of web monetization. These ideas have been around for like a really, really long time, like since the very beginnings of the web. Even before that, like these like ideas of like some kind of microtransaction or ways to, even Patreon and things like that are ideas like this, like ways for us to support that aren't ads effectively. And I don't know that I care so much about like my website, like where I have my blog and stuff. You don't have to support me. That's fine. But I think there are like a lot of content creators who it would be great if we could find ways to support really good content. Newspapers would be nice.
Hmm.
Maybe to not have to subscribe to them, but to have a a pass, that you buy, a news pass, and whoever's news I read, that's who gets money, like at the end of the month. I
Yeah.
think there's lots of interesting things we can explore there, and I would say that would be advancing something in there, not even having a solution, but just advancing something in there again would be high on my 2025 wish list, because I think ads currently play too much of a role.
Yep.
Okay, so I think that's kind
Yeah.
of it, right? I mean, we've gone through everybody's things and sort of our own things, and happy 2025.
Yeah. Let's make it a good year, people.
Yeah.